Welcome to Go Time, your source for diverse discussions from all around the Go community. Thanks to our partners for helping us bring you the best developer pods each and every week. Fastly.com, Fly.io, and Typesense.org. Okay, here we go.
Hello, welcome to Go Time. I'm Mat Ryer. Today, we are indeed getting a little bit spooky. We're going to talk to John Gregory about his 7 Deadly Sins of Go. And it's the perfect season for it. Night's drawing in, it's starting to get dark. We've all turned our gain up a little bit so we feel more close into your ears. So it's going to be a very cozy chat here. Joining me, it's that John Gregory that I just mentioned before. It's called John Gregory. Hello, John.
Hey there. Yeah. Well, I'm John. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, I'm glad. Thanks for confirming that. That's how we normally like to start the show.
Well, you never know.
Chris, can you also confirm that your name is Chris, please, in a very formal way? Chris Brando is also on the show.
Yes. That is in fact my name.
Good.
I don't know how to make it more formal than that. Then you are correct. That is my name.
Thank you. Accepted. And also Johnny Borsico is also here. Johnny, confirm your name. It's Johnny, right?
Yes, it is. But for this episode and this episode only, I shall be henceforth known as Count Golang Johnny.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, I'll have to be Bat Ryer then, I suppose. So I'll be Bat, Count Johnny. Do you two want to quickly now improvise a quick name for yourselves?
Absolutely not.
I'm good with whatever. It's
Okay, great. Well then, Richard, why don't you kick us off? We're talking about the 7 Deadly Sins of Go, right? So what are the 7 Deadly Sins, first of all? And then tell us a bit about your talk.
So, I mean, most people are, I think, vaguely aware of the 7 deadly classical sins of lust, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, envy, and pride. Depending on what site you look at, there may be some slight disagreement about the order or some of the actual wording of them, but those are the ones I kind of went with.
Interesting. I can't believe they can't agree on the order. What's going on?
I know, right? I mean, it's probably written down somewhere.
Is it about like these? They're in order of how bad they are, and that's why people are debating it. Is that the big debate going on in the old Deadly Sins world?
I suspect people write it down in whatever order they think looks, best. But I think, classically, one is probably supposed to be worse than the other. But let's have a look at how these potentially refer to, how we code Go. I thought it'd be a fun little thing to do.
And it was a great talk. It was at GopherCon UK this year, 2023 in London. And so basically like talking about a sin and then lining that up with a Go mispractice, anti-practice, anti-pattern, something like that.
I mean, I'll admit some of them may be a little tenuous, but, I think they generally work.
And it's not going to be perfect, is it?
No.
Did the right thing. Okay, cool. What order should we go in? I'll tell you what, how about this? Chris, can you please, out of the list, pick what is, in your opinion, the worst of these sins?
Oh, what is the worst?
Yeah, we'll start with the worst. Oh, no. Should we go the other way around?
The least.
Yeah, go on. Let's the least. Yeah, go on. That's it. So, Chris, tell us which one.
What's the least worst?
Yeah, absolutely.
Careful, I'll be judging you based on what you pick first.
Yeah, everyone will be. Everyone will be.
I would say pride is probably the least worst. I mean, these are all just looking at these descriptions. These are all terrible, but overly opinionated libraries. My justification is that I just don't have to use those libraries, so that's why they're the least worst. These other ones are just like, no, this could affect any code that I write. But
Oh, I see. So you're actually looking at the Go version of it. I want to know which of these sins, in your opinion, morally is the most acceptable.
Morally sins. Oh, okay.
Here we go. It's a different show now.
You could, yeah.
Oh, no.
It's spooky time. It's Go Time Spook Town after dark.
And I have to remember what these are in like the moral sense and not just
because they are quite weird. One of them's just sloth, which I just thought that was an animal. A sloth. It's an animal. I don't know why it's in the
sloth in the moral context.
There's laziness, I believe, yeah.
Oh, that seems like the least worst one from a moral standpoint.
Okay, here we go. It's got to get out of jail free there with the sloth. I think that's a fair shout, actually, Chris. Probably agree with that. Yeah. So, John, why don't we start with sloth, and why don't you tell us What was your Go version of the sloth sin?
So yeah, this is probably one of the most straightforward ones, because I just went with this one of lazy coding in the sense of lack of context. So not adequately commenting your code, or writing comments that are probably not worth the amount of time it took you to write them. And a big bugbear of mine, not adding context to errors, where people just go, if error not equals nil, just return error. I'm sure someone will figure it out later on down the stack.
Okay, interesting. So the interesting about you say about comments, like if you think about, and I used to do this where I would think, I want to comment everything to make it very clear, because that's what you do if it's professional. That's too much, isn't it?
Yes and no. I would argue maybe I over-comment to an extent, but then I tend to write my code with newer people in mind. So I tend to maybe be more over-explicit about essentially the business logic that's going behind it, so people can follow it a bit better. But yes.
You mean new people like babies?
I mean, I would contend Go is an easy language to pick up, but there may be the odd limit. Yeah. I mean, you've got to be able to at least handle the keyboard and not dribble on it too much.
Yeah, that's true.
That hasn't stopped me so far.
When it comes to contextual comments, though, I don't know if you can have too much. Right? I feel like you can have too many just, set a variable a equals 5, and you're like, this sets variable a to 5. Like, not that. That's not a contextual comment.
Yeah, not that.
But when you have like contextual comments that are adding to the code, I don't think you can have too many of those. I just think you can pile on quite a lot. But that's not the type of comment that people usually write.
You read novels, though, don't you, Chris?
I write novels. What are you talking about?
Oh, well, there you go. So you're into the words.
Wait, hold up. There's another thing here. I think we have to sort of call out, right? In the age of AI assisted coding, when you can ask some sort of AI assistant to say, hey, tell me what this function does or whatnot, piggybacking on what Chris is saying, the why or the is more important than the how, right? Because you can always ask, hey, tell me what this code does if I don't understand what it is, right? And you'll get, an algorithmic description of whatever it is the code is doing. But I think this kind of requires the documentation that you're adding to be more sort of at a higher level, meaning that this is what this service does, and these are the components of the service that interact with each other in this particular way to deliver this kind of value, right? Like, I think to me that becomes way more important, and so seldomly do I actually find those things, right? At big companies, small companies, I never find, why does this service exist? Why does this component exist? Why does this plugin exist? Like, why are we using this for? So in somewhere along the line, like maybe a product manager or project manager like had that information because they talk to the business to relay that to the developers, but all of that background, that context is completely gone. It's completely lost. So here I am walking into this code base that might be, 2, 3, 5, 10 years old, and I have no context for the existing of this thing. Should I delete it? If I delete it, and something breaks, that actually does more to tell me where this thing fits in, right, into the grand scheme of things than the actual code itself, because I have no idea why this code exists.
That is exactly the crux of what I was getting at. To be fair, you pretty much summarized everything I had in my talk, and all the bits I cut out because I didn't have enough time to get it all in.
You're welcome.
Wow.
Because, yeah, it's exactly that. I don't want comments that say add two numbers together, because I can see it's adding two numbers together. I want to know why you're adding two numbers together.
Right.
Because kind of the example I came up with was very similar to you. It's like you find a bit of code in 10 years' time, if it's still around, where someone in the middle of doing something changes a field or like adds 10 to a field, and it's like, why? That might be a business critical function, but if someone changes it, you're going to lose millions. Or it could be a bit of debugging code that someone left in and has forgotten to take out in the last 10 years, but you have no idea. So yeah, that for me, it's that context of why in the wider context, because it's not just that service potentially you're looking at in the microservice world. This could be referring to some functionality that's way off somewhere in the cloud of microservices elsewhere, but it relies on it here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. So I think that's really great. By the way, John, it sounded like you said in 10 years' time, if you're still around. Like, I think
the code's...
Oh, right. I thought you... Right.
Or if you're still around at that company, because otherwise it's someone else's problem. But in which case it's even more, important that you leave decent context behind you.
Yeah.
Otherwise they hunt you down, in the future.
I also think that those contextual comments can be useful for debugging. So if you're like reading some code and you're like, this code isn't doing what I think it should be doing, you can just go and look at it. And it's like, oh, well, there's a comment here saying it's supposed to be doing this other thing. So either this comment's wrong or this code's wrong. let me go figure out which it is instead of just assuming. Like I've gone to many new companies and seen code bases like that. And I'm like, this is, and then I go talk to the person that wrote the code. Like, oh yeah, we decided to change some stuff. So now like this comment's not right. It's like, oh, we'll just change the comment. So now it's the correct thing.
That's a good point. You've got to also look after it, maintain your comments as well. Like, because that's a rabbit hole fodder, that is right there.
It is. I've seen that so often where someone's changed the code and then they haven't changed the comment that went along with it, and now it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, that's why I like tests, honestly. Tests do a lot of that lifting for me. They don't completely replace comments, but I like tests for that same reason. And commit messages too, actually. Good commit messages. I did once say on Twitter, like, it's fine to sometimes follow up commits with like, tweaks. I was just making that statement because I wanted to do it and justify it. And then I got piled on Twitter, but I don't care. Come and get me.
I think it's an interesting point you make about tests, though, because the same thing kind of applies. I've seen plenty of tests that absolutely 100% test the function, and it's absolutely correct. However, the function doesn't do what you actually meant to do, because you've got a function that adds two numbers together, and it's unit tested to the nth degree, and it's perfect. But what you actually needed to do was multiply two numbers together.
Yeah, so your tests have got to be right as well. Pretty good one, that. Any other comments on this? This is quite a good sin, good choice, sloth, which is also an animal.
I do have to say that if you don't add comments to things, that's how you get haunted gardens. And it is spooky season, and people generally like haunted things now, but they will not like it the rest of the year, or really even now. People don't like haunted gardens. They don't like that scary part of the code base. So
yeah,
prevent the haunted by commenting.
Yes. Excellent. Okay, Count Johnny. By the way, congrats on nailing it earlier, Johnny, on that bit where John said you said exactly what he was going to say. That was really good. That was really cool.
So if someone else can get the next one perfectly accurate as well, that'd be fantastic.
Well, I think it's just become a game show.
Yeah.
Yeah, John can just confirm.
If you can get word for word what I was going to say, I'm sure Matt will sort you out with a prize of some description.
I'll sort you out with an accent. I think I could pull off John's accent. Count Johnny. This isn't. I'm just doing general Dracula voice. Count Johnny Golang. Why don't you pick the next
least morally objectionable one?
Yeah, in your opinion, yeah, that you were prepared to publish, knowing that people who you work with watch this and listen to it.
Yeah, don't be judgy. All right, like neither y'all on this here recording or those listening later, don't judge me for this, but
or the HR department.
Didn't you just say that you were going to judge me if I got it?
Hey, like do as I say, not as I do. Okay, all right. all right. Let me pick what I think is the next least egregious one. I think I'd have to go with pride.
Pride.
Yeah, I think pride. Pride would be the next least egregious one. Yeah.
Yeah. But then people say you should be proud of your stuff. What does this mean? Why is this a sin?
Yeah, it's that when you cross that line, which I can't wait for John to elaborate on what he means by overly opinionated libraries. Are we talking frameworks here, or like what do you mean?
Writing the sin for this one was hard because it's like, pride's a good thing. So how can I make this a bad thing? So it may be one of the more tenuous ones. So I took it as maybe assuming you know what's best for people when maybe writing libraries or frameworks. It comes from some very real experience of mine where I was looking for a library just to do a fairly simple thing, or so I thought. I was doing some like JSON schema parsing. Yeah, great. But no library I found would do what I wanted to do, because I wanted to be able to parse it and then generate some code from it. But every library I found that did something similar did it in their own special way. They all worked wonderfully, but none of them quite did what I needed to do. So I'd have to like post-process it or do something else to it or whatever. So that was the first issue. And then I thought, but hey, you know what? This is Go libraries. I could just hook into it, use whatever functions they're using, and just write my own wrapper around it and maybe do the bit that I didn't like myself, until I found out all those bits were private inside the packages and I couldn't get at them because whoever wrote the library had decided, you don't need to know about this. This is fine. Which, for some things in libraries is perfectly fine. Some stuff is perfect. Genuinely, it's internal to the library. It's private. You don't want to have to maintain it because, of course, if it goes into your public API, you've got a contract. You've kind of got to maintain it in your library. But sometimes you've got some fairly arbitrary functions that you could just expose, but they've just decided to make them private. And now your library becomes useless to me because I can't use it. Another very good example is I was writing a little program to check that people don't commit secrets into Git, because that's generally a good thing to make sure that stuff doesn't get committed. And almost every Git checker thing I found always works on the Git history in the most part. Or certainly it did like a few years ago when I was looking at it. And what I wanted was it not to get into the Git history in the first place, rather than have to go and find it and then strip it back out. So I wanted to use somebody's library to do that, but none of them worked in that way. So, hey, let's try and use whatever checking function they're using, because they've done the heavy lifting of writing all that, and just write my own wrapper that does it earlier in the process. But again, I couldn't get at it because it was all private, and I ended up having to write my own from scratch, which, was fun. And if I do say so myself, it's a rather nice little library, but I shouldn't have needed to do it.
What's it called?
It's Git diff check. It's in my GitHub.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes, and people can judge for themselves if it's a good library. They don't need to be told by you, John.
I mean, I still use it.
Oh, that's a good sign.
I do have a question on this, though. Why do you think from your perspective, the library is opinionated? Is it because it's doing too much? Is it because maybe it should be broken up into smaller libraries that work together and allowing you to pick what you need? Or what makes it overly...
What's your beef?
Yeah, John, what's your beef, man?
Or meat of choice.
Yeah, or meat supplement. Just want to make sure it's all inclusive.
What's your lamb, John?
What's your se7en, Satan?
Anyway,
Just move on. Edit it.
it's about putting a little bit of extra thought into when you're doing something, because you said about breaking stuff up into smaller chunks. Yet again, that was actually something I did when I was writing something a while ago. I don't know if you've come across Eliza, one of the first ever, pseudo pretended to be AI chatbots way back when. So long time ago now, I fancied writing a Slack bot, because everyone writes a Slack bot at some point in their career, and I needed something for it to actually do, because I just wanted to write it to learn how to write it rather than to actually do anything. So I thought, why not just implement an Eliza chatbot in Slack? Great, loads of fun. But when I did it, I wrote it specifically split up such that the Eliza engine is completely separate. So if you want to import that into write your own Slack bot, Teams bot, command line app, you can do that. The actual Slack bot part of it, the opinionated bit of I'm writing this as a Slack bot, is a totally separate wrapper that just happens to use it. So if you wanted to do it, you have options. You can either just install it as is, as a Slack bot, or you can go, I don't want any of that stuff you wrote. I just want to use the core implementation. So yeah, it's just more around that kind of thinking of assume someone is going to use your library potentially in a way you didn't originally intend. Not madly, but
Yeah. Give them options.
I feel like the pride part of this would come in as assuming that everybody's going to use this in the way that you want to use it. So you're prideful in thinking, of course, the way that I think about things is the correct way.
Yeah.
So this is how people are going to use. So you're not making it, open to extension and all of that jazz. So
Other examples then are things like logging, let people bring their own loggers. I think let people do their own concurrency as well.
Yes.
Sometimes it's very tempting to want to just solve that problem for them.
yeah.
But it's kind of hidden, and it's much easier to do a bit of concurrency just in a little function rather than everything else. The other one is panic. Don't panic. Have errors instead.
Yeah. That's another sin.
Yeah, don't get ahead. You can ruin the other sin.
Don't get ahead of ourselves.
You ruined the other sin.
Bat strikes again.
Damn it, Bat.
I do feel like on this one too. It's I was thinking about this the other day. I could never find the video. Maybe I'll go search for it again at some point. But I remember I think it was about custom elements. This is front end stuff, web platform. I think it was after App Cache. They were like, App Cache sucks. And for those people that don't know, App Cache was the first attempt to do offline web applications in the browser. And it was this kind of big API that was unruly because they tried to kind of do everything, and it didn't work for anybody. And the lesson that they learned from that is we should build lower level APIs and give them to people, and they'll build the things that they need instead of us trying to dictate something toward them. And I feel like that same advice applies to Go libraries, where it's provide something small of value. And if you want to have provide a larger value, provide many small things you can assemble together into that bigger thing. Because that also opens up, for that use case like you had, John, where it's like, I just want this one little part of this. Can you just let me have this one little part of it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got a lot of sins to get through, so we better crack on. We've had sloth, we've had pride. John, what's the next not as bad one?
Ooh, not as bad one.
And I think that is proper English, if you care to Google it.
Let's go with envy then.
Envy. Yeah, envy. I don't know. Depends what you do with it, doesn't it? If you're envious of something and it makes you work hard to go and get it, maybe that's not so bad.
I can think of a few examples. Gooby, Gaiton, Gava.
I would say this might be the worst sin for Go.
I mean, like writing Go as if it was a different language. Yeah. I think it's the commonest sin in general, and I think it's the one that I was most guilty of when I first started coding Go, because I came from a background of different languages, Perl, Python, Java, for my other sins.
So what did your Go look like?
Well, I think I made the mistake everyone makes, certainly if they're coming from Java. I tried to write Go as object-oriented with classes, and I very quickly got into a mess, and I realized why that was a very bad thing to do, and I spend the rest of my life trying to stop people falling into the same trap.
And that's why you do these talks and come on podcasts and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so learn why the decisions were made in Go and how to make the most of those by structuring your projects and writing your code, really, in a way that kind of suits that, right? And, it's funny because, factories is an example I hear a lot in Java, where they say, don't make factories and stuff. But genuinely, sometimes it is the perfect pattern if you, say it's driven by config or something, and you need a thing to create another thing. Do you know what I mean? So I also think we go a bit far on the exclude everything from other languages just because they're in there too.
I feel like this happened with locking specifically, because in the early days of Go, it was like, no, use channels for everything. Don't use mutexes. Mutexes are bad. And that was definitely one of the things that I struggled with for a while, because I was just like, oh, I'll just use channels instead of mutexes. I'd write all this code. It's just like, just using mutex. It's fine. It's not that terrible. And I feel like we as a community have moved on from that. So now everybody's like, no, it's okay to use locks and mutexes. You're good. That was definitely one of the early day things where it's like, no, Go's all about concurrency, and you should use channels for concurrency. If you're using locks, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, because that was the cool feature that Go had that other languages didn't have. So of course we want to use it.
Right.
But yeah, I actually think we've swung probably too far the other way a bit. Again, on that issue, I think we will settle a little bit somewhere in the middle, because I think people are just not using channels at all anymore. I don't think anyone uses channels anymore. I think.
Wow, that's pretty extreme. That
I feel like, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I feel like channels would be slightly better if I could pass multiple values down at once, kind of like I can return multiple things. If I could just pass a value and an error at the same time, that'd be nice. But I understand why that doesn't work that way.
So you want a multi-lane highway as opposed to a single lane highway.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would like to not have to do it myself, because obviously you can make a little struct that has the value and the error in it. But I'd like to just have it be part of the language, just like multi-value returns are part of the language.
Yeah. Could they not add that on? I feel like we could have that.
I think that would make life so much easier, because the amount of times I've got a separate error channel, or like you say, wrapping up in another struct to go back and then or just using an any type and then having to interrogate what it is back on the other end or something, depending on what you're doing. And if you could just say return an error. Because I know there's obviously we've got error groups and such now, but different situations.
I mean, the solution really, you have to create a new little type that has the value and the error for each of these cases, and you get around it. But
we should be careful not to sound hypocritical, right? Because we've just said, hey, make small things we can build on top of. Now we're arguing for and making bigger things that do more things.
I mean, in theory, you could probably, now that we have some generic functionality, do this sort of thing with generics on your own and make it not. But yeah, I understand that this whole thing could also have massive implications for the language. So I'm not saying that we should just go do it. I'm just saying it'd be a nice thing that would probably get me to use channels more often.
Go time has not yet reached the point where us just chatting decides the future of the language. We're just not there yet.
Not there yet.
We are growing. We're always growing, but
not enough clout, not enough likes, not enough followers, not enough retweets.
Not yet. Yeah, exactly. Tell your friends, everybody. What do you mean they don't know what Go is? Of course they don't, because they don't listen to Go Time. What do you mean they don't even have a computer? Get them one for Christmas or one of the other festivals in the world. There's loads of them, so you've got no excuse, and get them into it.
I will say on that front, at least, yeah, Go was very easy to set up. I had the misfortune of trying to set up Java and VS Code the other day. My laptop almost went out the window.
Oh, yeah. And Go, of all the languages, one of the quickest to type into Google.
As long as you remember to put Golang, not Go, otherwise,
Yeah, in trouble.
yes.
I don't know. In recent years, just writing Go has gotten much, much better.
Yeah.
Are you in incognito mode? Because otherwise, isn't it just learning you?
You want to do an incognito, yeah. As long as it's like something that looks kind of Go-ish, if you're just like saying like Go function or something like that, then it's going to be like, oh, here's some random stuff about computing.
Why are you searching for Go in incognito mode?
To see if it works. Because people say you have to use Golang. So I'm just like, I don't think you have to use Golang. So I do it in incognito.
I think Bat's trying to insinuate that your next sin will be lust.
It was a link.
I mean, Matt gets to pick the next least worst sin. So I don't think that lust is the next least worst, though.
Oh, well, it's up to me, mate.
It is, but we can judge you.
You can.
We're verging into wrath here.
They're turning into it, isn't it? I can feel a little bit of hostility, to be honest. Let's go for lust as the next one. Lust, of course, is what happens to people when they love Rust. I don't want to get into the moral side of this, but, very natural stuff going on there, But
Did you know, I just now realized while I was looking at the word that the letters in lust also spell out.
that's getting cut.
It just dawned on me. I'm like, wow. Was that like premeditated? Did whoever was that on purpose? Whoa, mind blown.
Wow. Count Johnny is a saucy kind of guy.
That's a bit for plus plus. Like,
Yeah. That's subscribe to Changelog Red right there. All right, John. Lust. What was your Go sin for lust?
Well, I mean, you spoiled it a little bit earlier. Again.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about channels and things, is exactly that. It's especially when new to Go or thinking, hey, the thing about Go is concurrency, right? So everyone jumps in and goes, I've got to write Go routines everywhere. I've got to do everything with channels. And they end up with like this massively complicated bit of code where they step back going, oh, but it's fantastic Go. And you go, yeah, but you could have just done that with like 3 lines of code and not had all the issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, all those features are like, really powerful and they're really great if you need them. But I think a trap a lot of us fall into is that Go is concurrency. Therefore, you should use Go routines for everything. And then you very quickly realize, oh, actually, now I need to instigate channels and waiting patterns. And how do I debug this thing? And how on earth do you unit test? And you fall into all these little rabbit holes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. And I like the link to, like, you're lusting after these cool features. John, do you think channels are sexy?
I mean, I've never quite thought about them in that context.
But they're sort of attractive features. And it's why I remember it like brings a lot of people to Go. Like Channels Milkshake brings a lot of
the boys to the yard.
Yeah, basically. Gophers to the yard.
Brings the gophers to the horde. There we go.
There we go. So yeah, I think that's a nice one. Like, and honestly, simplify is such a, just make things as simple as possible.
Because I think people don't realize in a lot of cases that Go is performant enough for what they need without having to do it. Because it's a big selling point for Go with the performance and the concurrency. And so they come from another slower language or an interpreted language, and they come in and they go, right, so we need to use Go routines and all these channels and everything to make it like get all this hyperscaling. And it's like, no, you just do, standard HTTP server and it'll already handle thousands more requests per second than you had before. You don't have to do anything special. Just save that for when you need it.
Yeah, and I'll save that little sound effect of you standing up and down when I need it as well, because it's brilliant. That was a brilliant little sound, and I hope we have that on our soundboard for future episodes.
Oh, Matt. I feel like with the complex features as well, I think people always usually do come to Go because they're like Go routines and channels and all this concurrency and all of this. But I think there's like this other selling point of like the simplicity that you get from Go, from it pushing back on you very hard when you try and write overly complex things, like the lack of cyclical imports. Or I think Kaylin talked about this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, where she mentioned that like the talk that she did at GopherCon was inspired by her sitting with a bunch of other gophers and looking at code at GopherCon in 2019 that they'd never seen before. And they were all like, oh, you're looking for this thing, scroll up. And she was like, well, how do we all know that this specific definition, I think it was like a method or something, is going to be up and not in some other file or somewhere else? And it's like, those are the things that I think make Go more performant overall, but also like, that's one of the selling points. Is like, hey, you kind of know where things are. You can walk into any Go code base as long as it's written in actual Go and not, Envy, so write it in Groovy or something, or Guava. Goofy, not Groovy, Goofy. You kind of walk in any Go code base and you can see, oh, like this is where these things are supposed to be. And there's also a sense of like something is missing here. Something's not where it's supposed to be. Why isn't it here? And you can like go fix that as well. And I think that's one of the big selling points of Go, is that, once you know Go, you can kind of read any of these code bases.
Yeah. How do you learn that? Does that come with experience? Because I know what you mean about looking in a file and you sort of have a sense of where that particular type is going to be based on almost the importance of it in the file.
Yeah, I feel like it's just that thing you have to go read a bunch of Go and you eventually pick it up. It's something we should probably write down, but I don't really know how we articulate it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things of like idiomatics in Go where you don't want to be overly prescriptive about it, but at the same time, a little bit of extra pedantry when someone's first learning Go to get them into those good habits saves so much time later, because sometimes you get a lot of pushback, say, on like pull requests, etc. People are like, oh, yeah, but why do I have to put it there? Because I can just put it over here. You say, well, yes, you can. They both work. Go lets you do it. But if you do it this way, then other people will be more familiar with it. They'll be able to just easily parse it, and it will just make your life easier in the future. But it's hard to articulate exactly how at this point. It's only later when you've hit that revelation, you've hit the issue, and you go, oh, I see why I shouldn't have done it that way.
Yeah, that goes for a lot of the complexity and avoiding it. Like, we want to do what's interesting and hard. Like, we want to do hard things. So it's fun to do, but it's later when you pay the price. The reaper comes to reap. The ghost of Christmas future comes back and is like, what have you done? No, he doesn't speak that one. It's just dong, a bell chiming. Terrifying.
The celestial garbage collector.
Nice.
Right, whose turn is it to pick the next one?
I guess it's mine again.
Yes, it is.
We got wrath, greed, and gluttony. I'll go with gluttony.
Okay, gluttony, and this one in real life is it simply just eating too much?
I think it's overindulgence, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Is it more general? This
was a difficult one because if you look at definitions, greed and gluttony are fairly interchangeable in terms of definitions. So I came down on this one as, it's more overindulgence on pulling in more stuff than you need. So greed is more the accumulation of like just wanting other things, whereas gluttony is more of the actual physical consumption.
I see, yeah. So this is like being greedy, pulling in frameworks and dependencies with abandon, just pulling it all in, anything, yeah.
Exactly.
And why is that bad?
As with a lot of these things, in its place, it's not. Because these may be the deadly sins, but none of these, particularly on their own, are wrong. It's all very contextual as to about how right or wrong they are.
You need a lawyer.
Indeed. So if you need a framework for something, there's nothing wrong with using a framework for it.
Right.
The sin here is more reflexively reaching for the framework before you know you need it. So coming from other languages, the mindset in, say, something like Java is, right, what framework do I need? Cool. Now what's the problem I need to solve? Rather than what's the problem I need to solve? Do I need a framework for it?
Right.
So it's more of the inverted thinking. Because the example I gave in the talk was like massively overly simplified and contrived, as most of my examples are. of just a simple Hello World HTTP server and handler, just using pure Go. It's just few lines of code which just does the job, as opposed to doing exactly the same thing using a framework, in which case now your code is like twice as long and your Go sum file is off the page because of all the dependencies and things it's brought in. Which, if you need all those things, is fantastic. But if you don't, as I said then, is that every dependency you use is a dependency that someone could stop supporting. It's a dependency that could have a security vulnerability in it, which, like if you work in a particularly high security environment, could be another dependency some poor security person is going to have to audit for you. So if you don't need it, it's not wrong to use it because it does exactly the same thing. It's not like it doesn't work. But like the example I kind of tried to use is like it's overpacking for a holiday where, you're going away for a couple of days, you just chuck up a few things in the bag. That's all you need. Whereas if you reflexively say, whenever I go on holiday, I always pack 3 cases and I pack my swimming things and my snorkel and my thing and all these things, and you take them with you on your little city break, it's not wrong, but at the same time, you'll get back thinking, I didn't even open half those cases, or the ones I did open, I had to root through stuff to find what I wanted, and it probably cost me more in travel cost.
Yeah, and I had to go snorkeling in the Trevi fountain just to use the snorkel. It's not a good reason to do it.
I mean, if you want to admit that right now, that's good. I mean, considering the weather while we're recording this now, I think I could probably do the snorkel if I went outside.
I think that the kind of 2 big areas where this comes in as well is with both HTTP servers and with like flags / like application bootstrapping kernel things where people are just like, the standard library isn't good enough for me, or like I need all of these specific features for things. And I also think what winds up happening is people reach for these frameworks because they don't know how the thing works. Like I'm building a web server right now for the first time in a very long time. And it's like a struggle, but it's a struggle because like I don't quite remember all of the things that I need to do. And sure, a framework would be able to like help me just spew out the stuff I want. But I'm like, no, I got to remember like, okay, this is like, what are the methods I care about? Like, do I want to have proper HTTP hygiene and like return, 406 if it's not an allowed method? Do I want to like have options available? Do I want to use caching properly? If you actually know all of those things, it's a very small amount of code that you need to write. I think the same thing's true with like flags, where it's like people are like, I got to go reach for that flags library, that flags framework, or go use Viper or something like that, or go use Cobra. And it's like, there's a few things that you really need to do as the base level of your application, and that's probably good enough for now. And if eventually it's becoming unwieldy, then you should bring it in. But doing that as a starting point is just probably going to give you a headache. I remember a few years ago, at a previous job, we had, I think it was Viper, and it was just this absurd amount of boilerplate. And I was like, this is silly. I like got rid of all of that, and I wrote using the Reflect package, like something that did the same thing. And it was like 100 lines of code, and that removed like 500 lines of boilerplate code. And I'm like, this is obviously the better thing now. We don't have this dependency that no one really understood that was causing a lot of problems.
But it's cool to use the frameworks. Don't you want to be one of the cool kids?
Absolutely not.
The little devils appeared on the other shoulder. This guy.
Don't you want to be popular? It's like,
You are popular, Chris.
I am.
John, is it raining where you are?
It's raining quite a lot, yes.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, the rain would go down the snorkel, I think. I was going to say that before Chris ruined it by being professional.
Well, if you get an angle.
Yeah, you got to go opposite angle to the angle of the rain. Too much.
I assume you've never done this before.
No.
I live in Wales. I'm used to this.
Fair enough. Okay, Johnny B. Count Borsico. Go Lang Johnny or whatever it would count. Bongy.
Yes.
Yes. Can you do the voice?
Yes.
Oh, man.
We've got Wrath and Greed. Which one do you reckon?
Wrath might be the next one.
It doesn't seem like you, though.
Well, because I think greed sits on top of the pile.
I see.
I think greed leads to most, if not all, the other ones, in my view. But yeah, I think wrath, yeah.
I've never seen you angry, though, Johnny, yet. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
It must happen. It must happen, right? He's a normal person. He must get angry at times.
Yes, I am human. It does happen, but not,
Yeah, but I bet you're just like, well, I'm quite distressed by that. How far does it spike your motion chip?
I work very hard, Matt, not to allow my highs to be too high or my lows to be too low. I try to stay in between there, you know?
Right. So what? You're having a too good a time
I never want to have too good a time, right? Because then I let myself go.
because it's too good.
Because it's just too good, right?
Yeah.
And I never want to let myself get too far down because then it's hard to get back up.
He doesn't want to engage in sloth or gluttony. So, not too much, not too little.
You know, just right in the middle.
Same with the frameworks. You need some dependencies. Just don't go mad on it.
Need some dependencies. Some uppers and downers.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
Those are dependencies.
I look forward to seeing how much of this episode makes it to air into the podcast. Okay, John, wrath. We touched upon this earlier, and you did start to get a bit angry. But tell us, what is this one?
It's okay, mellowed out again.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so this one is misusing panic where you shouldn't do. Because, I mean, when I first started learning Go, the first thing I was kind of taught was, like, you don't want to panic. Because, I mean, the clue is in the word, really.
Right.
Yeah, like, no one really likes to run around screaming. Well, I mean, I'm not speaking for all of it. It may be cathartic at times.
That's how Johnny calms down.
I mean, we've all turned that webcam off at times in meetings and, just had a bit of a moment. Or at least hoped we turned the webcam off. But yeah, so Go is very predicated on checked errors. So actually forcing you to properly handle your errors. Because I've come from far too many other languages where error handling is, just throw it somewhere. I'm sure something up the stack will catch it and do something with it at some point. And then that usually ends up with some big, stack trace down the user screen where, they look at it, get a bit of a headache and have no idea actually what went wrong and just try it again. So it's about, again, either treating Go as if it had try-catch exceptions, which you can do with recovers if you really need them for your really, 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 really must not fail code where stuff's outside your control, but don't use that as a standard programming flow. Treat, an exceptional case truly as an exception rather than, routine. And always try and use actual errors where they are and also actually handle those errors. Because again, like I say, don't just go if error equals nil, not equals nil, just return the error. And again, just hope something else handles it because that's not handling the error. And it also comes into the other thing that I've seen misused a lot is must functions, because I think a lot of people don't quite understand what they are. Because obviously it's only by convention for a start that people don't quite...
Tell us what it is then.
Yeah, it depends what it is.
You must.
Indeed, I must. But I've seen it far too many times where people have put regex must compile right in the middle of a web handler.
No.
And it's like, that's great, right up until in fact you've made a typo in that, and now every single request is now failing. If you're going to must compile, at least do it at the package level so it happens at startup time, so the service never got started in the first place, rather than waiting for your first customer to come in and then have an error.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I challenge you to have a must compile for user submitted regular expression input in your handler.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably a sin in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that speaks to the point.
For a good time. For a good time.
Well, if you want to do some incident practice, quite a good way.
Misuse of wrath or misuse of panic will definitely induce wrath in others. They will come after you with a vengeance.
Chris, the way that you accidentally said that, I genuinely had the image of a new keyword in Go, which was like a super panic called wrath. Yeah. You can just wrath it if you're not in the recovery. If you do something and that doesn't work, then you can wrath. Do you know what I mean? And that means business.
That just deletes the code base.
Yeah.
No, you invoke wrath on your coworkers, and then Rob Pike shows up and discourages them for whatever they did.
When you panic in real life, you don't get to just stop. Do you know what I mean? Like in Go, the program's just like, right, that's it, I'm done. That's it. Yeah. We can't do that. If you panic about something, you can't just be like, well, I'm done. Here's a little error message. Here's a bit of a stack trace. Bye. But we should have that feature, I think.
In real life, leave a stack trace after you panic in real life?
Yeah, well, not that specifically. No, not that. Now you've said it back. Now I've heard it back. I don't think I want that.
It's the stack trace, not just your list of grievances.
Yeah, exactly. It's why I panic. Yeah, you're right. It's just like, shit. And then you just like prints out your back or something. The dot matrix printer. Bzz, 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 and you scratch it off and you're like, there you go. You caused me to panic because it's probably because if you're crossing the road in the US, the cars are allowed to go at the same time as humans. And that gets me every time. They start to go. They start to go as well. They don't just wait back where they are. Do you know what I mean? They actually start to go like as if like, what are you doing? Quick then.
Yeah, it's contextual. Yeah, there's context. If you're in New York specifically, yeah, you'll get run over by a cabbie any day of the week, yeah.
Oh, if you're a tourist to New York, please obey the signage. Don't follow the New Yorkers. That will get you hit by a cab. The New Yorkers know how to walk. We'll just like, whoop, no, I'll just go.
Yeah, literally on Google Maps, you've got in New York, if you do directions, you've got taxi, car, public transport, or panic. Panic is actually one of the options for you how to get around New York, which is how I do it. The only time I will panic in Go code is to protect against something that's already going to panic, like a nil pointer exception. I've done this a couple of times and I feel justified. I basically check if it's nil and then panic with a more specific error. That's it, or a more specific message.
Yeah, is that still panicking at that stage? Because you've kind of handled it.
Well, I literally send the panic. I panic though in the if statement because it's going to panic anyway. And in this context, I'm not returning an error because actually sometimes I like to set myself the goal of trying to not return an error with something, just so that it's easier to use. Depends on what it is, obviously. So sometimes I'll do that.
That sounds like a code smell bad.
Does it?
I don't know. You'd have to justify yourself with some code examples, I'm afraid. Because here's my take on panic. Don't. Right? So the only place I will panic, right? Like to go back to the regular expression example. If I have a library, but not even a library, I don't like panics on libraries, first of all. But if I'm initializing an application whereby I know that during initialization, I absolutely must have a particular piece of configuration. I can't have, a reasonable default. I can't have anything, right? Like this thing just doesn't run without this particular config or value or whatever it is, right? Then I panic for sure. But once the program is running and it's doing things, whatnot, like there's no justification for having a regular function call do a panic. Like even if there's defer and recover somewhere up the stack, like it's just, to me, that's a bad code smell.
Yeah, I feel like panic should be used if like it's not possible for your program to proceed and have it be in a correct state, right? Like if something happened where it's just like there's no way for you to like recover in this part of the program or the program at all, then it's just like, okay, no, like blow up. But if there's a chance of recovery, then you should be using errors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so Johnny, do you check nil of all if you've got things that need to be set? Do you always check a nil and then return an error if it's nil and you need it? I guess you would, right?
Yeah. So depending on what it is, right? So if it's like initialization, for example, like I don't mind panicking and dumping something and letting the program crash in a spectacular fashion. If I'm really trying to be a good citizen, in a Unix Linux world, I might sort of capture something that's missing. Right. But even then, most of the time, like I so go out of my way to avoid panics. I'll capture whatever is missing. I will emit some sort of error message or send, emit my trace if I'm using OpenTelemetry, or it indicate somewhere that something went bad. And I'll do an OS exit with a non-zero exit code. Right. Like that's a clean exit. That way, if my tool is being used in a Unix pipeline or something like that, right, I'm behaving well within that ecosystem by returning the right exit code. Right. These things matter in certain environments. So I'm trying to do my best to have my program, my process be a good citizen within the host in which it's operating, right? But panicking to me, it's just like I'll panic if I'm like debugging and I'm writing the code right then and there and I just want to see what happens. I actually want the full stack trace, right? But like for operational production ready code, no way.
Although I do have to say, when it comes to panic versus OS exit, if you're writing library code, do not call OS exit. Please call panic instead. At least panic I can catch. If you call OS exit, it's like, oh, why is this thing? I said, I don't know. Some code somewhere in some dependency decided that this is how it was going to handle things. Like, no. Don't do that.
Right, John, this leads us to our last deadly sin. Do you want to take us home with this one?
So apparently we're closing out with greed,
Apparently we are.
which I took as to be preemptive over-engineering.
Preemptive over-engineering.
Yes.
When should you over-engineer? Later?
Never.
I mean, ideally never, yes.
Right.
But yeah, certainly don't want to do it like before you even need to. Because future-proofing to an extent is not a bad thing. So, as somebody said, there are like known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. So if you have a known known coming down the track, so you know in a little while a new feature's coming in, then coding now, knowing it's coming up, is fine. Because even if that feature gets pulled, it's like, yeah, whatever, but you've got a reasonable expectation it's coming up. You could also potentially have a known unknown where maybe business hasn't quite made the decision about what they want to do. Maybe they want to go with this product or this product or this product, but you know they're going to do something. So you can still at least code with that in mind. You don't necessarily have to put it all in place, but you at least make sure you don't code yourself into a corner that cuts off avenues to make it harder to do those things that you don't quite know what they are, but you know they're coming down the track. But the trap a lot of people fall into is the unknown unknowns, where they start going, but what about this? What about, but it could do this in the future. I mean, no one's ever mentioned that this business wants to branch out into, I don't know, a whole load of self-service car washes, but, because we're a bank or something. But you never know what the board might come up with. And so let's build a module that can handle that just in case.
Could be seen as money laundering as well.
Indeed, yes.
Good point, me.
Indeed.
I've contributed.
The example I kind of come up with was, again, being like way more over contrived and just starting with a very simple service that literally has to say return your company motto. So you've got a reasonable expectation that at some point in the future the company's going to change their mind about what their company motto is. So a solution that fixes that, is just a format print line, because you can just go into the code base and change it. That does it. You don't know what they might change it to, but you've got a reasonable expectation that that will still work. But what you don't want to fall into the trap of is like, but what if a non-technical business person wants to do this? Maybe we need to start putting this into a database and build some kind of CMS front end so that they can edit it. And, you know what? Maybe they don't want to do it in text. Maybe like somebody wants to write it out on a bit of paper and like scan it in and then have that use some AI to turn that into some funky thing and add some music to it. So let's put in a module to do that now as well.
I'm smelling a tiny bit of scope creep.
Indeed. But you would be surprised how often this kind of happens. And I think where I've mostly seen it recently is, unfortunately, with generics, where people have got a bit carried away with, let's make everything generic because this could be any type and this service could handle absolutely anything that's thrown at it. And have actually ended up coding themselves into such a corner that when an actual feature request came in to change to do something else, they realized they basically needed to throw away the entire service and write it from scratch.
I feel like I like the known and all of that. There's a talk, actually Kevlin Henney has done this in many talks, but he goes over like those three, but there's also a fourth that is like unknowable unknowns. Like you never know what's going to happen in the future. That is an unknowable unknown. And I think that's the bucket that most of the things people are trying to preemptively engineer for falls into, which is just like, you shouldn't. Like we're trying to be like, oh, we'll save some time in the future. And it's like, that's a risk that you haven't really quantified properly. It's like, what are the chances that thing happens in the future? And what are the chances that when that thing happens, the work you've done is going to properly fit? And if it does fit, how much time have you actually saved yourself versus just building it for what you need right now? Building for the known knowns, building for what the requirements you have right now. So I think like a lot of preemptive over engineering, just preemptive engineering in general, is people thinking that they have some idea of where things will go in the future. And the future is always an unknowable unknown. You have no idea what's going to happen in the future. So just write whatever works for right now and then move forward in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier about like the frameworks and the HTTP server. It's like you could pull in an entire framework now to be able to handle all those cases. But right now, you just need to write a simple service that just returns a string. You don't need that complexity. And due to the nature of Go, it's not like if you don't use the framework up front, you're precluded from ever using it. You just layer in the complexity as you go along, as you need it. So scale out to that complexity as the requirements come along, rather than trying to preempt and saying, let's build this wonder service that will do everything, which will actually just make your life harder, probably more bugs, just more complex, when you could have just added an extra bit in later.
So rule of 3. So for those who are still early in their for those who are still listening, if you manage to make it this far, you get a prize. For those who are still early on in their professional software engineering careers, listen to old man Johnny. Even if the business says, yes, this is coming, we're gonna want to do X, Y, and Z. This particular thing you're building now, yes, we're gonna want to support 20 different widgets for this thing. It's gonna be pluggable. It's gonna be all these things. Do all these things, and you start and go ahead and create this elaborate system to be able to be the Swiss Army knife of all the things. Let me tell you right now, very, very seldomly does that actually happen. Okay, because business changes all the time. Decisions change all the time. Yes, the person who's telling you this thing is coming down the pike, we need to make it reusable, we need to make it this, that, whatever it is. Yes, they might have it on good authority that it is indeed the plan, but guess what? Plans change. So, my friends, rule of 3. Here's what I mean by that. The first time you're asked to do something, just make the thing the simplest possible thing that could work. Okay, because you don't even know that if the thing you build is going to exist tomorrow, because again, plans change. The next time you see it, now you have an additional data point as to, okay, is there reusability in here? Cool. Project manager, product manager, whatever it is, they tell me, yep, it's coming and this is the next instance. That's great. Now you have another data point. It's still not yet time to refactor, to make things modular. Only on the third iteration, only then do you start to seriously consider, okay, this thing is coming up a few times. Now, the different ways it has come up, is that something I can maybe abstract? Is that something that, what are the similarities? What are the differences? Where are the edge cases for me handling, this kind of situation, right? Only then do you abstract, only then do you refactor and have the Uber thing that can handle different variations on a particular process, right? Rule of 3s. If anybody tells you different, they're probably full of chocolates.
I do have some nuance for the preemptive over engineering as well, because I think the thing is that people, once again, especially with business requirements, think that the unknowable unknowns are really known knowns. But I think the things that people want to pretend are unknown unknowns or knowable unknowns are actually known knowns. I think the big example of this, and one of the things I'm really annoyed about constantly, is things like content negotiation for HTTP. There will be a point in the future when you will want to change the structure or format of what you're sending over the wire or what you're receiving over the wire. And if you don't build content negotiation from the beginning, it's going to be nearly impossible to put that in later. So you really do build yourself into a box with something that you will want to change. I mean, we see this all the time with API versioning, where it's impossible to get rid of an old API version because you haven't built yourself a way to easily move forward. And I think a really good example of this is what is happening with Quick as a protocol, where they've already revved to version 2 of Quick, because what they realized the problem with TCP is that they never revved the version. So when they needed to rev the version, they couldn't rev the version because everything had ossified into knowing this very specific image of TCP. And if you changed it, everything would break. So with Quick, they're no, we're going to intentionally rev the version. We're intentionally going to make a new version of this. Doesn't add any new features, that just changes some bits in the image so that middle boxes and things can't ossify around this specific thing. So it's in the future, you will want to change things. That's a given. We will want to make advancements. We want to change how Quick works, change how all these protocols work. So we put in place the things now to enable ourselves to do that in the future. So I would say that's one bit of preemptive engineering that is extremely important to do. That's also the thing that engineers never want to do. If you build not even many of the HTTP frameworks don't even properly do content negotiation. I actually was looking this up, and it's kind of hard to find a library in Go that will properly do HTTP negotiation as far as what the spec says you should be doing. But it's a very important thing to do to give yourself the flexibility to move in the future. Even if it's just around optimization, if you have one API call that is a lot of boilerplate data and you don't want to be sending this giant JSON blob, being able to just be oh, hey, I'm just going to make a little binary protocol and we'll do some content negotiation if you can accept this and I'll send it to you. That's a very easy way to be able to pick and choose the things that are taking up a lot of bandwidth and reduce their bandwidth a lot. in a way that's backwards and forwards compatible. But if you don't do that content negotiation from the beginning, you're going to have stuff that's just like, nope, I expect Jason and I will spit Jason back at you. And I don't care what you tell me. I will always just do this.
Well, a knowable unknown is, what does the spooky unpopular opinion song sound like? I have a button here for it. I don't remember it from last year. Let's find out. Who's got a spooky?
Sounds sad.
Opinion? Yeah, it does sound a bit sad. Well, that's spooky, isn't it?
Sounds
happy time.
more sad than scary.
Yeah. Okay, John, why don't you kick us off with your unpopular opinion?
Well, I guess kind of went with two. I went with a nice Halloween-themed one, which is that vampires are way overrated.
You actually wrote down,
especially in popular culture.
You actually wrote down, which I thought was really good. Vampires suck. I thought that was actually quite clever.
I was like, oh, was that intentional? Very good, very good.
Yeah.
But so what's up with them? Why don't you like them? Because they can't go out in the sunshine?
I just think they're a bit overrepresented in popular culture these days. You know, it's just a bit of a, ooh, vampires.
Not fair on the Franken people, is it?
Well, because interestingly, we did a vampire-themed escape room the other day.
It does not surprise me.
And I think half the team were expecting romantic vampires, and spent about half our time huddled in a little group in the middle of the room, almost crying because of the jump scares. To the extent that we ended up with a discount off our next trip to the escape room because they were so traumatized.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
What are you saying? You're telling everyone not to panic. They've got a discount.
I know. To be fair, we worked in our favour, and their other rooms are pretty good. But yeah, I think they were expecting a slightly different flavour of vampire and weren't quite expecting scary zombie thing appearing in the mirror right in front of them, kind of jump scares.
That's your Twilight generation.
I know.
Yeah, we want the glittering kind.
Yeah.
We want them to glitter.
I don't think they were quite that bad, but I think,
Shiny, glittery. Quite hard to say that. Shiny, glittery. Try and say that quickly, John, for me. Shiny, glittery, shiny, glittery.
So I see what you're trying to get me to do.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I just said it, so that's why. That's how I knew it was going to work. All right, well, anyone disagree with that? Vampires? Do you love them? Chris, you love vampires.
I do agree that they suck.
Do they suck blood? They drink blood, don't they? That's their thing. That's like their favourite dinner.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't like anything in horror films, like with zombies, like they're dead or whatever, and all the bits are all not working. They can't still be walking about. Physics would like, you know what I mean? All the physics of what makes our bodies have to be like this, all that still applies in the universe. It doesn't suddenly go away. So if I saw a zombie, I'd just be like, I'm sorry, I'm not buying it.
Does this happen often?
No, it has never happened because I don't think they're real, John.
Is this your unpopular opinion, Matt?
Yeah, actually it is. Inconsistency, like it's a horror genre, fine. I can't really get on with it because it's inconsistent. Like there's one Paranormal Activity where there's this beast and it grabs people and pulls them around, but they can't touch it. Do you know what I mean? It's like either you can touch me and then I can touch you back and stab you in the bit if you, I don't know, beast. Just go for the soft bit, whatever. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? But so it has to be fair, consistent. Actually, not even fair. So that's my thing. I struggle with horror films for that reason. Mm-hmm. And I also though don't get scared. Even since I was a kid, I'd go into the dark room in the house and I'd say to the ghosts like, "Come on, then, come and get me," just to see what would happen. And they never got me, and I just knew they were more scared of me than I am of them, like spiders.
Mm-hmm. You get more scared by code than you do ghosts and things and beasts.
I mean, well, some of the code that's out there,
it's kind of spooky.
I know. I've seen some pretty terrifying stuff.
Some horror stories. Some horror shows.
It's okay. I've deleted most of that from my GitHub now. It's fine.
Johnny, I feel like your unpopular opinion might be inspired by something I've said, in which case I'm prepared to take this unpopular opinion personally
and make it your own.
Unpopular opinion. Yeah. No, I feel like this is against me, but go on. Let's have it.
Yeah. My unpopular opinion. Nobody's going to read your commit messages. Deal with it.
Because I said earlier, didn't I? I said earlier, commit messages are a sort of way of commenting code. And you didn't pipe up then, Johnny. You waited until a format segment that I created on Popular Opinions to come back and let me have this.
Yeah, so you want me to state for the general public that your original statement inspired my now better and much more improved version of your statement. My unpopular opinion.
Happy to help, Johnny.
Yes. Okay. Hey, yeah.
If I've improved something that you're about to do, then I'm good with this. Let's carry on.
Great. Thank you, Renfield. My context, if you'll allow me. So the last time, I can't remember the last time I personally went and looked through commit messages to figure out when something made it into the code base, not made it in, or like when I'm doing investigation. I can't remember the last time I did that. Like the first place I'm gonna look is any documentation about it. Maybe is it mentioned in the README? Is it in whatever your favorite issue tracker is? Is it in there somewhere? Is there something in there somewhere? Is it is there a PR at some point that talks about this thing, right? Very rarely am I ever, that's like a last resort. Very rarely am I actually going to clone the repo and start looking commit by commit what the message was, or searching through commit messages to see if something did something. Like it's the last resort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. Do you not have that thing on in Visual Studio Code where it shows you on the line? It ghosts it. It shows you like the blame. It shows you like who and when they edited this.
Yeah, the who is important to me, but only because I get to know who is familiar with this code.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
not because I'm looking for something someone did.
No.
The blame.
Exactly. I mean, it's called blame, but it really is a bad name, honestly.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like only to know like who's familiar with this particular piece of functionality, right? That I'm looking at right now.
Or who last worked on it's useful too. Why is this? Who added this and why? That's a fair enough question.
But any comment in there though, I don't. Like, I don't know, maybe I've been one too many times, but any commit messages in there, like I don't trust commit messages. First of all, like they don't. Like oftentimes, and I say this only because I myself am guilty of actually committing things that are unrelated to the commit. Right? It's only because they happen to be on my path to getting something that I'm like, oh man, this thing is really annoying. Let me just fix it right now.
Yeah.
I forget to make a commit just for that thing, and I just keep on going. Then it's like by the time I'm done, I'm like, oh man,
yeah,
like I just committed this whole thing, and I'm like, this particular change had nothing to do with it. And I'm like, do I really want to go back? And then my sloth kicks in, right? I'm like, do I really want to go back and start to extract this thing, make it its own commit? Now I got to create a separate ticket so I can track things all the way down. Now it's just this.
This sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't read commit messages. You don't write commit messages anybody wants to read. So you don't want to read anybody's commit messages. I see what you're doing.
I mean,
Loving it now. It's turned around on Johnny.
Fine. Damn it, Chris.
You cracked quite quickly then, Johnny. If you don't mind me saying.
I know. Yeah, I have strong opinions, loosely held.
Very. It just takes a glance from Chris. Yeah. Great. Right. Oh, well.
I have an unpopular opinion.
Chris, we would love to hear it.
Okay. So my unpopular opinion is that if you are doing, obviously I'll have context to this, but if you are doing software engineering, Go is one of, if not the best languages to then write your software in. And I will not name the languages that Go is better than in this respect, but you can fill in the blanks. And so that's the opinion. And the reason I say that is because I feel that software engineering is actually about software design. And if you design your software, Go is wonderful to write your software in. If you don't do design, there's a bunch of other languages that have nice features like memory safety and type safety that will help you with your not designed software to make it less terrible and more manageable. So, but if you just design your software, a lot of those problems aren't really problems. And so Go is wonderful in that respect, even though it has some memory safety-ish problems and some type-ish problems compared, I guess, as some from the stronger opinion world would say about those things. Like, we have very flexible typing in Go. You can do a lot of bad stuff with Go's memory model, but you design your software, Go's great. If you don't design your software, go do something. But why are you not designing your softwares?
Good point.
That's the question there.
Right. So, but your entry in a competition to try and find the most unpopular opinion in the Go community is Go is great. If I summarize that.
Yes.
Do you know what?
I feel someone didn't read the spec.
Do you know what? I've seen weirder ones.
because you see, last time I tried to have a very unpopular opinion, and it wound up being very popular.
Yeah.
So now if I just try to make a popular opinion, it'll be unpopular.
I think very interesting. Interesting. We'll see. Yeah.
I also kind of, yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Indeed. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm afraid our time has come to an end. Let's pack up our cauldrons, put away our broomsticks. No, get out.
There's no like witches here. What are you talking about?
I don't know. What's the small spooky things? We've done spiders. I think that's it. Ghosts. They're not real. Star signs. They're not real.
Oh, there's an unpopular opinion.
I know. I'm such a Capricorn. I don't believe in star signs. Oh, typical Capricorn. Well, that's all the time we have, I'm afraid. Thank you so much to everybody here. We talked about, didn't we? Sloth. We talked about pride. We talked about envy, lust, gluttony, wrath, greed. And we went through all of them, which was pretty good stuff, to be fair. You also heard, I think, of all the podcasts in the world, this episode probably contains the most occurrences of the phrase known unknowns or any of that variation. Listen back. We've got them all. Thank you so much, Johnny Borsico. Count Borsico, Johnny Kolag. Were you counting the whole time as well? Like on Sesame Street?
1, 2, 3.
Very good. Oh, very good. Chris, we didn't get a kind of spooky name pun for you, so we'll just imagine your name covered in blood.
Okay, that's excessive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Night of the Living Chris.
Yeah, the Night of the Living Chris. There you go. That's subtle. Is that a pun?
So,
Is
like,
that a pun?
every night? Like, what?
Yeah. Nightmare on Chris Street. That's another one.
That's an unknown.
With the nonsense that happens in the building I live in.
Yeah. And, of course, John Gregory, thanks so much for coming and chatting with us. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Wait, hang on. Are we really gonna not acknowledge the horns that have been on John's head this whole time? we did an entire episode and not mention the damn horns. Am I just seeing things?
Johnny, I think it's your time.
He smokes.
What horns?
Yeah, Johnny, what horns?
Okay.
I mean, Matt did call him se7en a couple times, so,
Are we going to do this whole episode and we're not going to mention the fact that John has a Bostonian accent? John, do
Bostonian accent.
Right, that's definitely getting...
I'm not getting that. My friend. I'm not getting
Where's
that,
your
mate.
accent? Is it just South Wales, John?
Yeah. I mean, I have an English family, but then I was born in South Wales. So even though near Swansea, which is a quite strong accent, it's not a particularly Welsh area. So wherever I go, someone probably thinks I'm from somewhere else.
Yeah, it's just you sound a tiny bit like a pirate. So I was sort of hoping for...
I've never been accused of being West Country.
You're joking? Are you literally talking like that?
I know what this is.
It's not, Johnny.
This is Bat setting himself up to do another pirate.
It wasn't. It wasn't. I have to do it now. Obviously. This wasn't what I wanted.
No kidding. Do it. And you have to do a spooky edition.
Okay. Join us on next time on Go Time, mate. We'll bring the rum and the spooky listens. Savvy? No, I don't savvy either, mate, because I've messed it up. Anyway, thanks for listening. See you later, mate.
If you like this spooky rendition of the Go Time theme, check out our new music album on Spotify and Apple Music. Yes, Changelog Beats is now a thing. Our 0th volume is called Theme Songs, and it includes special remixes in addition to the classics. And our first volume is called Next Level, featuring many of the video game inspired tracks you've heard on Go Time over the years. Just search for Changelog Beats in your music playing app of choice. You'll find us. Thanks once again to our partners, Fastly.com, Fly.io, and Typesense.org. And to Breakmaster Cylinder for collabing with us on all our music. That's all for now, but we'll talk to you again next time on Go Time.
Game.